Okay, let's return to the big story tonight. 500,000 people in Victoria still suffering from a power outage. Let's bring in Sky News host in Melbourne, Steve Price. Great to see you, Steve. And here in Sydney with me, former Speaker of the House, Bronwyn Bishop. Great to see you, Bronwyn.
See you.
Steve, this has caused major issues in Victoria today. 500,000 people, by the latest figures, still without power. We know that transport, commuters, absolute chaos today. Look, Keith Pitt was on Sky News a bit earlier, and he said this is because of Victoria's over-reliance on renewables. Have a look at what he had to say.
Welcome to a glimpse of the future for Victoria. If you want to know what it looks like without coal-fired power, this is it.
Steve, do you think this is the reason that we've seen this chaos today?
Well, I think, Shari, we got a real glimpse into what the future's going to look like. I think Keith Pitt's largely correct there. So to clear it all up, Loy Yang A produces about a third of Victoria's electricity. It is a coal-fired power station, and it went offline at about 2:30 this afternoon. Now, the reason for that is still being investigated, but a number of transmission lines, and there are pictures up online of these things folded over west of Geelong, just went to the ground. And so suddenly we had no power out of Loy Yang A. Victoria had to start importing electricity from Tasmania. The wholesale price of electricity went through the roof. And as you point out, 500,000 homes at its peak. I'm not sure how many are still off, but probably hundreds of thousands, many not due back on air till about 10:30 tonight. 9 train lines were shut down during peak hour in Melbourne, so people couldn't get home. And I've got to make the point here that Victorians, and Melbourne in particular, have had a very mild summer. There's been very rare days up over 35 degrees. We've had 2 days, 2 only, of hot temperatures, and the whole system's fallen over. And the best the Minister, Lily D'Ambrosio, could say today was, well, you can't control the weather. Look what global warming's doing to us. Seriously.
Yeah, Bronwyn, you're shaking your head over here. I mean, there's been this push towards renewables, but then you end up like days like today in Melbourne. It was 36 degrees. Then there was a hailstorm, typical wild Melbourne weather. I'm not offending anyone who's in Melbourne. We all know that, and Sydney's becoming increasingly like that. But this is what happens. The power, the coal-fired power station was offline and the system collapsed.
All I can say is get used to it. This is the future. This is what the zealots who say we can live on so-called renewables, but they're not. They're factories in their own right. This is what we can expect. And we will see coal-fired power stations go down, not because towers fell over, but it'll be because there has not been sufficient money spent to keep on the upkeep and maintenance of those power stations, and they will go down. And this idea that you can stick a battery in somewhere that's going to give a smaller amount of power than the coal-fired power station gave is just going to be proven that everything people like me, like Rowan Dean, like so many others have been saying for so long, this is the future. It's madness. And that's why I can never forgive Morrison's giving away the fight and the right policies that the Liberal Party had and went off to Edinburgh because he wanted some popularity. I mean, you just cannot do those sorts of things.
Yeah.
This is the future. And unless we come to our senses and say we will move to keep those coal-fired power stations going until we can get the module nuclear power stations on the footprint of those coal-fired power stations, we will be a country going downhill fast.
Yeah, extraordinary in 2024, and of course Labor's ruled out even looking at nuclear options as well.
Well, for heaven's sake, with a person like Bowen, what do you expect?
Yeah.
It's crazy.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, doxing. It has been so bad in the Jewish community, this outing of Jews, lists being spread on the internet, that even the Prime Minister, Anthony Albanese, has recognised that more needs to be done. He's pledged to fast-track laws to punish those who release personal details of other people online. Steve, this is about time. There hasn't been enough action. We're now seeing 1930s Nazi-style lists of Jews being shared and very personal details, their social media, their pictures, details about where they work even. I mean, the Prime Minister needs to rush these laws through.
He does. This is terrifying. I mean, I've been writing words as a journalist for 52 years now, and I never had even heard of the word doxing. I had to look it up 2 weeks ago. It's not the Australia I grew up in, Shari. I mean, I just can't understand how we've got to this point and we don't have strong leadership in Canberra. There's been some strong leadership, and you and I have talked about it before, from Chris Minns in New South Wales, pathetic leadership in Victoria, to the point where last week we saw a number of Jewish Victorians who were prepared to go public and talk about the fact that they have to move out of suburbs like Brunswick, Fitzroy, and Carlton because their shops are having Star of David stickers put on the windows. They feel under threat and they're going to have to move to the southeastern suburbs. That's not the Australia we want to live in. It's not the Australia we grew up in. And the Prime Minister's got to come out and say something much stronger than what he has. He seems to be just quietly speaking about it, but not prepared to go right out there and say, enough's enough, we've got to stop this.
Yeah, I agree. There hasn't been enough leadership. We've been complaining about it on this show ever since October 7 started, and then the rise of anti-Semitism took place. The Prime Minister's been on the back foot. It's partly because of his lack of leadership, and also, Bronwyn, his continued criticism of Israel that then makes other people feel like they are right to persecute Jews. They blame Jews for what's happening in
Shari,
the war with Israel.
This is what happens when so-called respectable people are captured by this anti-Jewish race theory. And that's what it was in Germany in the 1930s. The hatred of Jews was race theory, that one race was superior to them. And what we're seeing here is a proponent saying that the Arab race is superior to the Jewish race. And it's got to stop. And if you want to get a good handle on just how bad down the track we're going, try reading this book. It gives you...
Nazi billionaires.
Nazi billionaires. It's comparatively recently written. It's an untold story, but it shows when people who are the leaders in the community, who are the leaders of business, who are the leaders in academia, comply with race theory. And that is exactly what we're seeing here. And you can't help feeling that because there are nearly 1 million people of Arab descent in this country and only 99,000 people of Jewish descent, that there's some sort of bad decision-making going on.
Comes down to petty
particularly
politics and
where those people are
seats.
in those seats.
Exactly.
And it's got to stop, and there needs to be strong leadership from the Prime Minister, not the sort of weak-kneed stuff we've seen from him and from Penny Wong.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. Well,
can I add there that the Prime Minister's got to get tougher with the Greens as well. I mean, a lot of those seats that I just mentioned to you, Brunswick, seat of Melbourne, which is Adam Bandt's seat, Fitzroy, places like that, they're held by Greens politicians who are fueling this hatred of Jewish people.
Yes.
They're making public comments about Palestine and about Gaza that are agitating these people to do what they're doing. So get tougher on the Greens as well. Call them out, for God's sake.
That's what I think the Prime Minister's doing as well. You know, he was on radio just yesterday afternoon. Penny Wong made a press statement just yesterday. Both of them absolutely smashing Israel for daring to go into Rafah in their war against Hamas and their bid to bring back home their hostages. So Albanese's there criticising Israel, and then he wonders why people are persecuting Jews. You know, it's not a stretch to tie the two things together, Bronwyn.
It's not. It is all about leadership.
Yeah.
All about leadership. And Steve, although you said Minns is doing a good job, yes, he's making the right sounds, but he's got a police minister who'll do nothing.
Well, exactly.
And so it's no good saying, unless it's backed up with action, it's just not enough.
Yeah.
And I am shocked. I mean, I did contemporary European history in some depth, and I thought in my naivete that the end of World War II would be the end of it because we had learned. Eisenhower said, show all the photographs, learn, it must never happen again. And yet I am seeing the same insidiousness that I learned about, what happened in the 30s, happening here in my country, and it's got to stop.
Completely agree. Thank you, Bronwyn. Now let's have a look at the United States. As you know, the massive issue over the past few days has been President Joe Biden and the view based on the special counsel Robert Hurst's report that he is an elderly man with poor memory, that he's too impaired to even face trial, yet he's still president. He's now trying to do whatever he can to reverse this image of him as an elderly, forgetful man who's not competent. And so he's turned to TikTok. The Biden HQ account made its debut yesterday during the Super Bowl. We played you that grab on the show last night. But Steve, you know, even the United States government has banned TikTok from government accounts. So this is kind of odd that Biden is going onto account that his own national security team say is not safe for anyone with confidential information to be on.
Well, it's bizarre, and it just shows that there's panic inside the White House. I don't think they saw that report coming last week that described Joe Biden in the way it did, and it basically should end any bid he makes to become president again. I mean, you wouldn't give the bloke a job, you know, serving behind a counter in a service station. He wouldn't be able to remember how much change he needed to give you. I mean, it is just frightening. And then you've got Kamala Harris, who's the vice president. I mean, she is just hopeless. And so if that's the alternative, what are we going to do here? I mean, 83% of Americans in a recent poll said they don't want Joe Biden to run again as president. And 63% said they've got no confidence in Kamala Harris. So, I mean, America is in huge trouble. I mean, if the choice is between Biden and Trump, you've got to really worry about the United States. I mean, we've grown up with good and bad presidents, but none as bad as those two.
Yeah. What do you think about this, Bronwyn? Just before we go, Kamala Harris has announced that she's now, quote, ready to serve. Surely people would even prefer the flailing and forgetful Biden than Kamala Harris.
I think what the Democrats are trying to do, I think they shoved Biden out into the press conference to show just that he is incompetent and that he cannot do the job, and let the cards fall where they will. They needed a mechanism, in my view, to try and force the situation for them to pick a fresh candidate. And I think that's what we're going to see down the track, and it won't be Kamala Harris.
It's a live possibility now that they're going to have to move
I think so, and I mean, maybe they told him about TikTok, and maybe he forgot.
Good point. Bronwyn Bishop, Steve Price, thank you so much. Good luck, Steve, in Melbourne, getting the power back on.